Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. I'm your host, Julie Boye, and today I'm bringing you a friend of mine that I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So please welcome Damian Nordman. Hi, friend.
What is up?
Oh, this is exciting. We're finally getting to do this after meeting several months ago. We connected through our podcast community. Damien is actually the host of the Superhero podcast. And I know we recorded an episode on his podcast. I can't wait to share that with all of you. He's also the former president of the School of Metaphysics. He's an expert in money affirmations and an intuitive business coach. Now, I bet you can tell from that introduction that Damien and I have a lot to talk about, a lot of things in common, a lot of areas of interest that both of us are connected with. And I know Damien also practices gratitude. It's a foundation of who he is and what he does. So, Damien, before we get into all these amazing details, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story because I know there was maybe some formative experiences that kind of happened when you were a child.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of things that happened. I feel like that my childhood, it was a good childhood for sure. It was a lot of fun, but it's almost like I was more serious in some ways back then than I am now. Like even though you might like people might not have been able to tell it like internally, but I did have an experience where and you and I were kind of chatting about this. I did have an experience when I was 11, almost about to turn 12, where I came down with spinal meningitis. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, it is what can be a virus or a bacteria. I think mine was the bacterial infection, which is not as bad, but still very bad. And it affects the brain and the spinal cord. And in fact, the brain begins to swell and the spinal cord begins to swell. And you have to stop drinking water or your brain will literally burst. Like it will expand to the point where you will die. And of course, it's an infection. So, I was flu-like symptoms where I was, vomiting and just like completely fatigued and just like all this headache. Of course, the headache was immense because my brain was swelling. But fortunately, we caught it in time and I had to have a spinal tap, which is also not too fun, um, but better than dying. And went to the hospital for about a week, and they were able to get it under control. But I remember that experience as one where I was just like after I was better and I was out of the hospital, I just remember thinking like, wow, I could have died. I'm almost 12 and I could have died. And I mean, that was very spelled out very clear by the different doctors who said it. They were like, if this had gone on for another few days and you'd kept drinking water, because they basically put you on an IV and then let you suck on like little chips of ice. So you kind of get a little bit of moisture in your mouth, but not enough um, to stimulate the swelling effect to allow that to go down. So just that whole process, I just remember thinking that's kind of amazing that I'm still alive, right? That I get to be alive and I'm well now and I'm okay. I didn't have any permanent damage and I could, I remember actually this kind of memory of me going out to our back patio and then me like petting our cats. We had all these barn cats and we lived out in the country and just kind of like thinking like, wow, okay, I'm alive and this is such a great thing that I'm going to continue my existence and not with from this point forward when it was a very painful and traumatic experience, but I made it through it. And so if I can make it through this, I can probably make it through a lot of other things that might seem really really trying in my life.
Doesn't it make you just really have reverence for our human body? Right? That we can go through really traumatic physical illnesses like that and we can get through it. And then there's no physical evidence that it ever happened. Now, our mind, of course, as you said, remembers the trauma like it was yesterday, right? As soon as you think of that moment again, you're back there. Our mind is such a powerful thing. And I think what a lesson for a young child to really understand, like, that reverence for not only the human body, but the reverence for life, and the how incredible it is to be alive. So did that did that sort of help guide you in your, like, how did you end up at the School of Metaphysics? Because I don't think it was like one right went to the next. I feel like the road, went on a few sort of twists and turns to end up from that sort of formative experience to
Yeah.
working at the School of Metaphysics.
Well, interestingly enough, it was only about 6 years later that I found the School of Metaphysics, because I found the School of Metaphysics, or attracted it to me, or was drawn to it when I was right when I turned 18. And I was still a senior in high school, and I began studying there as well, taking a class one night a week at the School of Metaphysics, while I was still taking my high school classes. And you're right. I mean, there was so much that led up to that. I mean, everything from my parents instilling a certain amount of spirituality. I mean, not that they were like super super spiritual people, but definitely teaching me to pray, and teaching me to have reverence for God. And we went to some different churches that were pretty cool throughout my growing up years. And then also just being like so much into like Eastern philosophy and martial arts. I took martial arts growing up, and so I had a lot of that Eastern influence from a young age, just from that, really, even just the study of martial arts and related kind of topics. And then probably one of my biggest influences was that in high school, I had a youth group and a youth leader who is an amazing man. He was only about 10 years older than us. He was about 28 when I was 18, around there. Yeah, about 10 years older than us. And he and just some amazing people, other youth in this youth group I was a part of. And he really brought things like the Bible and spirituality and connection with God, and sharing of that into such a keen light that that definitely enhanced and opened up my pursuit of all things deeper. And it's funny because that really kind of led me to, right before I found the School of Metaphysics, I was kind of frustrated and kind of angry and really disheartened that everything seemed so separate. Like it
Mm.
seemed to me that art and philosophy and math and science and all these things, I could see these connecting links. And yet everybody wanted to like separate everything, and spirituality, and it was all like boxy, and like we're going to put everything in these little boxes and not have them really communicate. To me, it was like, that's so weird. And so I started to tell people at the age of 17 that I'm looking for the underlying truth of the universe.
Whoa. Those are big
And
words.
people were like,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. I'm looking for the underlying truth in the universe at 17 years old. That is, what an interesting beginning of your journey, and that guidance that, I mean, to me, it feels like you were guided along the way through other forces beyond you. I love what you said too about how everything being so separate. I was just listening to a different podcast, and they were talking about education and how, someone decided years ago that like you would study biology over here and chemistry at this time and physics at this time. And that was decided by, a group of people. And then it just stayed the same people that decided that you would have art over here and science over here and math over here, and there them all shall meet. So is that kind of what, like, I don't really know a lot about the School of Metaphysics. What does that sort of encompass, an organization like that?
Oh my gosh, it's I'll try to do it justice. It really warrants a few of my biographies to like really talk about everything that happened, because
Yeah.
I mean, it's like one of my former students and good friends of mine, he would say, he's like, man, it was such a quirky organization, right? Such a crazy organization, because we would there is a structure to it where we learn spiritual and mental practices like meditation and dream work and focusing exercises and concentration. and just like all of these tools to make your life better, to hone your mind, to give you like real spiritual experiences, intuitive experiences. I mean, we would even do chakra work, and later on we would do like thought projection exercises to each other and study, things like astral projection and lucid dreaming, these more esoteric kinds of things. So it had a very practical side to it, with the focusing and the universal laws and like goal setting and success principles, right? And then it had a very esoteric side to it. And then we would study holy works like the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching and the Dhammapada, and we would interpret them in ways that were very universal, right? It was non-religious. It was very much like, how can a spiritual being understand this in a practical way as we're living out our physical lives? So, and then there was service that was involved in the organization, where, and there was learning how to create abundance and prosperity. There was a lot of like community activities in our school branches and at our headquarters, which was like on 1,500 acres of land in Missouri. There's just so much. I mean, so many different aspects to it. And of course, part of the curriculum was that once you finish the first cycle of lessons, there were 4 cycles or 4 tiers. And the first cycle, after that, it was required that you actually teach the first cycle once you got into the second cycle. And then after that, every cycle forward, you had to be teaching somewhere, and you had to be leading in some capacity. And so, that made it very interesting, because it was kind of this organization of teachers and leaders. So, wow, I mean, that's just scratching the surface. I mean, I could go on and on, but the whole crux of it, I guess you could say there were kind of 2 things to the education there. One is that we were encouraging people and teaching people to become, as we called it, a whole functioning self, which is like knowing your whole self, knowing your whole mind, your whole heart, your whole spirit, knowing all of that as much as possible, within the curriculum and what was being offered. Um, and the other thing that we taught was learning how to learn. So much of what I've gained from the School of Metaphysics, I've now taken into learning from business coaches and learning from other types of coaches, because I basically never stopped being a student. Literally from the time I was in kindergarten, maybe even before that, but definitely by kindergarten. I mean, before I graduated high school, I went into the School of Metaphysics, and I was part of that organization for 22 years. And so, I was always like, that was what we taught. You're always a student first. So literally I've just always been a student and always found somebody to teach me something new. And I feel like that's the key to life. That's the key to immortality, is you keep learning, you keep growing, you keep evolving, expanding. And sometimes that's more assimilation. Sometimes that's more active learning. But it's always got some component of, moving forward to it.
It's really interesting to me that you talk about this whole being, whole learning, and really like all the sides of who we are as human beings, having like a physical experience on this planet, spiritual beings. And I love what you said about being the eternal student. I think, as we navigate, we do unschooling, which is a type of homeschooling, which does not involve a formal curriculum, which is very difficult for many, many people to understand, that you can still learn if you're not being forced to learn what's written in a textbook or what your teacher standing up at the front of the class is teaching you, and how you can be excited about learning in so many different ways, and that commitment to ongoing study and growth. And one of the things that I try to share, especially when I explain kind of the unschooling model, is exactly what you just said, is that I myself as an adult, I'm choosing to continue to learn and study all the time. I didn't stop learning because I left university. I continued to learn and grow. I'm always learning new things. I mean, you and I are both podcasters. We had to learn how to become a podcaster, right? That didn't just, weren't born podcasters. Didn't even exist when you and I were born. So I love that perspective that you have all around that learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think I really do believe it's a key to health. It's a key to a long life. It's a key to a happy life. At least it's one of them. I mean, certainly love and loving people and having loving relationships, friends, family, or whatever works for you in that regard is another one. But um, I think you can have all the love, and if you don't have growth and learning, you can end up stagnating and being pretty bitter or frustrated, or just get stuck because things are changing and people are changing and you're not, right?
Well, and really, whether if you choose to not learn and not continue, you're not going to stop change. You're actually changing. You're just going in the different direction than the rest of us. So now speaking of change, so you are the former president of the School of Metaphysics. You have transitioned to a new career, a new business. Can you share with us a little bit about how that came about? What inspired you to move on from what sounds like a really amazing experience that you were having?
It's actually well, okay, you know how you hear about people, a lot of people these days who were in like a corporate job and their soul was like, getting sucked out of them, and so they went and they become like an intuitive healer or so, who knows what, or an
Yes.
astrologer, or they go and start their own business. So my journey was kind of like a weird opposite version of that, because even though I was with this amazing organization and there was so much I learned from it, I really overstayed my soul's welcome there, right?
Mm, okay.
Where I was there for 22 years, it was all that I knew really my whole life. I mean, I worked some other jobs because in the early stages, like you don't really get paid in that organization like you normally would at like a job in somewhere else. Um, but I was with that organization for 22 years, so I probably should have left 3 or 4 years earlier, like, a bit earlier, at least, maybe more. So I experienced kind of what people in a corporate setting might experience, where, except for me, it was a little different. I was becoming kind of bitter about some things that I hadn't gone on to do what I wanted, and that, I had been changing and really changing the organization as well. But a lot of my predecessors and teachers and people before me weren't really willing to change and get out of the way. So it was sort of like this clash of groups of like my generation and the people I taught, and were similar, similar people, and like the older kind of dinosaurs who were not willing to evolve. And so it kind of my parting with the organization, let's just say, was stressful and challenging, and I was actually getting very sick towards the like physically sick towards the end of my time there. And then when I left, I mean, I just kind of went into a depression for 2.5 years, where it was just very challenging, and if you think about starting something when you're 18 and your whole identity getting wrapped up in it, and it really was a culture. um and I mean, there were a lot of benefits to that culture, but there were dark sides to it as well. And so, my whole identity, I just had to go, oh my gosh, okay, who am I now? Right? Like, who who am I without this organization? And what do I want to be doing with my life? So really, that was a little over 5 years ago. And so it's really kind of taken me this 5 years of introspection and trying things and hiring business coaches and meeting other people, and just engaging with different people in a variety of ways to draw out, and trying things too, right? And coaching and teaching and starting a podcast, and seeing what fits, to really start to get an identity where I'm like, okay, I'm this intuitive business coach. I'm a Dharmapreneur, and I teach other Dharmapreneurs like how to fulfill their life's purpose through their businesses, right? And I feel like it's always an unfoldment, but certainly it's kind of taken probably this last year or so for things to really come forward, where I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to feel more like myself again, and like not only myself, but like kind of this new self that has been birthed from all of this.
I don't think you're alone in that feeling of when you set your mind to a career, profession, job, company, for even if you maybe you have a profession and you change companies, But when you've been doing something for 2 decades, you really do get your identity wrapped up in it. And I know many people in my own life that would love to make a change from a corporate career that they have, but their identity is so wrapped up in who they are. And like you were the president of the School of Metaphysics. Like some people get really wrapped up in that title and that, I'm the CEO of this and the this over here, that they don't have the courage that it takes to make that change. And like you said, it wasn't easy. It took you 2.5 years of being in a really difficult place to start to feel like who you are. I wanted to touch on, I wanted to hear a little bit more about what you said about being a Dharmapreneur, because that sounds like what we really need is people living to their gifts and serving in that way. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I actually intuited that word a few months back, like late last year. And a lot of what we taught at the School of Metaphysics, we actually taught about Dharma and Karma.
Mhm.
And the way I understand karma is really just what we're here to learn, right? It's what we're here to, like the lessons or the understandings that we need to be able to grow into that we haven't quite got yet. I do believe, in past lives. And so we've, maybe we've built some of that, but we're still lacking in some areas. So there's some way that we still need to grow. And then Dharma is what we've already mastered to some degree. So it's the understandings, it's the permanent learning, it's the amazing qualities that we've developed, the constellation of growth that we've produced in our many lifetimes. And that's really focalized in this lifetime as like our gift. A lot of people think of it as their mission, their calling, their purpose, what you have to give. And so so I find that it's important to focus on that dharma, and then you can also that helps you actually fill in your karma when you're focusing on your dharma, because one affects the other. And so it came to me that that's what I do. I work with people who are dharmapreneurs. So you've heard of mompreneurs and kidpreneurs, and all these different preneurs, like different entrepreneurial
Mhm.
type of people, which I think is amazing. It's really good to have all of that. And so I thought, well, this is what I do. I help people truly release, unleash, and unveil their higher purpose and create right livelihood and wealth and abundance through a business that they create, that's their own, that's an expression of who they really are. And so I work with Dharmapreneurs. That's even the Facebook group I have, Dharmapreneurs, right? Superheroes in business and life. So that's it. Just like I was literally walking around my condo one day between getting a snack or something, going to the bathroom or something, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's what I do.
Oh, I love that. I love that intuitive hit and that you went with it. I love that you got that creative burst and you just like, yes, this is what I'm doing. And you just went for it. And it's amazing. So you serve people through a Facebook group. Is that an open group, or do you have to be part of your coaching program to join that group?
It's open in that anybody can join. It's a
Okay.
private group, but anybody
Right.
can join.
Okay.
And I mean, people who are gonna have the most fun in there are either people who are truly already kind of dharmapreneurs, or people who just like to learn about this stuff, like wealth and abundance, and living your higher purpose, and tools and things for running your business better, like really practical strategies and tools, but also all of the metaphysics and all of the universal laws that allow anybody to have a fulfilling life. So actually, people who aren't really entrepreneurs can come into the group and really get a lot out of it. It's just people who have a business are going to get a lot of bonus stuff that that's really applicable to them right now.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we'll make sure that people can access that through a link, of course, when we share the podcast episode. And then you work with clients. Do you work mostly privately, or do you do group coaching? How does it work if we want to work with you?
I really like the hybrid approach of
Okay.
group coaching, where you get one-on-one coaching with it, and
Okay.
that's kind of what I've experienced in recent years too. And I like it because people learn so well in a group, I think, where they're sharing with each other and things get filled in that they might not have thought about. And then also having enough of that one-on-one time to really go, oh, I need some help with this one area, or I need to really understand my next step, and let's figure it out. So, and I do also do one-on-one coaching if people just want that. So that is, that's an option that I do as well.
Oh, I love that. That sounds amazing. I like the hybrid model, actually. It is really effective. You do the group stuff together, get some time one on one with the coach. And, we've had so many amazing coaches on the podcast. And what I always like to say is that what's great is that there's a coach for you at whatever point you are in your life, whatever you're looking for, there's the right person out there for you to connect with to help you to get to the next level. And I think that's what's so powerful about working with a coach. Now, I did mention a little bit at the beginning that gratitude is a big part of, who you are and how you live. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what does that look like for Damian? Is it like a daily thing or weekly? How does gratitude show up for you? Or how do you practice it?
So a few ways. So often I will have a morning gratitude practice. At the very moment, I'm like a few weeks ago, I stopped doing that as doing some other things, but I will often go for weeks or months having some daily practice. And what I like to do with that generally is I have a notebook that's really pretty much just for that, where I will write down at least 13 things I'm grateful for in the morning. Sometimes I'll go to 20, 30, whatever I feel like, but at least 13. And and for me, that's a great way to, I think when you write something, you're at a greater point of focus. And there's something about manifesting those thoughts through a written word onto a page, right? I mean, or saying it too. It's another way to do it too. But that's really been one of my bigger practices. And then sometimes I'll just incorporate saying out loud what I'm grateful for. And sometimes if I can't even do that, I'll just think about, like, focus on my thoughts of what am I grateful for? Like, what's something that is important to me? And what's interesting about that, I think, is this whole practice is the more you have a gratitude practice, what I find is that spontaneously more things pop into my experience that I'm grateful for. And sometimes it can, like, I was on a podcast, I was on Jetty Azuma's the Waking Man podcast a couple weeks ago, and he does a lot of men's work, and we were talking about, for us as men, but I think for anybody, even being grateful for the thing. It's really easy to be grateful for the things that are like wonderful things, like a beautiful day, and like, I have this home that I live in, or this car that I drive, and all this sort of things that are kind of obvious. But what about, being grateful for, like, the fact that I had spinal meningitis, and that it I wouldn't be who I am now if I didn't have that experience, or,
Mhm.
like I said, I went in a 2.5 year depression after I left the School of Metaphysics. Well, it sucked at the time, but as I was, finding gratitude in those moments, it started to make me realize, okay, there's so much benefit to this. There's so much gold to this, that it's showing me so much about the way I was living my life. It was showing me about the patterns of my dad and my mom, and like my inherited ancestral patterns, and these vibrational things that were actually keeping me unhappy. And so this needed to happen, and kind of the way that it unfolded, and wasn't a lot of it was kind of even unpleasant, like the process of me leaving the school was unpleasant, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that happened. But all of that, I can have so much gratitude for it, because I can see now so much more clearly why it needed to happen, and how it taught me certain things that now allow me to bring even more to people that I wouldn't be able to. Because if somebody, doesn't have any kind of challenge, struggle, or strife in their life, they actually end up sometimes manifesting it because they need something to be able to relate to the rest of humanity, right? It's like, it's like oftentimes it's like you need something to be able to see, like, why we're here. And so anyway, just to say that there's a lot. I think it's important to have a regular practice, even if you don't do it, even if you kind of ebb and flow in and out of that practice. I think it's smart to do it for periods of time, because you really do get connected with, I think, your heart, your soul, and those deeper aspects of yourself. And I think gratitude is one of the best ways and the easiest ways to do that. But it does require, like, doing it over time.
Yeah, it's a practice that we evolve over time. Okay, one quick question. Why 13 things? Is that a lucky number for you, or is there a reason for that?
Um, I teach 13 different universal laws,
Oh, okay.
and 13 is kind of it's a special master number that a lot of people overlook, because like Jesus as well as Gautama the Buddha, they both had 12 main apostles or disciples. And
Right.
if you look throughout history, there's a lot of that happened where there would be like 12 of something, and then there would be like a 13th sort of master, like even like the gods of Olympus, there were 13 of them, right? And so you start to find that number over and over again. And I like it because it somehow got to be considered an unlucky number, in our Western culture. And it is like it's not divisible by anything but one in itself. So it's kind of an interesting
Yeah,
number that
the
way.
prime. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I find it to be kind of a very cool master number to work with. And so sometime back I decided that would be how many I would at least do is 13.
Well, I'm with you, my friend. 13 is my second favorite number. So I've always liked 13, maybe because I was like, there's no reason why this number should be unlucky. It's a great number. So I'm with you. I'm also on the 13. I knew there was a story there because 13 is a pretty specific number. So I love what you said too about, when we go through our challenges and difficult times, it's not that we're grateful. It's not so much we're grateful for tragedy and loss and all those things. It's that we can look back and say, this happened. It sucked, and now I find gratitude that that moment led me to where I am today, or I got a really incredible lesson from that. And sometimes we don't even get a lesson, but to me, I think if we miss the lesson in the challenge, we're missing out because then we just get the challenge again and it becomes more difficult because we missed the lesson the first time. Speaking of Dharma, right? Like, and the karma and everything. So, oh, that's a whole other conversation, my friend, that I won't get into right now. But thank you for sharing that perspective because it's one that I've shared a number of times in the podcast. And so sometimes hearing it from a different voice or a different perspective, someone will go, totally get that. Damian, I love our time here. It's been so much fun. We've kind of touched on so many incredible different things, and there's lots I'm sure people will want to learn about you. Where is the best place to find you?
I'll keep it really simple. Best place is to come into my Dharmapreneurs Facebook group.
Okay.
And that's Dharmapreneurs, superheroes in business and life. I mean, that's where all the action and the fun's happening. That's where the party's happening. Um, it's where I deliver a lot of my best stuff and content and interactions with people and all of that. So yeah, and I mean, and if you're not on Facebook, you can find me. Maybe if someone's just like an Instagram person, you can just find me at Avatar Damian on Instagram. But yeah, the Facebook group is definitely the place to come hang out with us.
Oh, that's so amazing. Thank you so, so much, Damian. Really enjoyed this. I really appreciate that you shared your insight and your wisdom with us and all your beautiful ways to practice gratitude. So thanks again, friend.
Thank you. You're welcome. Appreciate it.